I did want to say something as we're on the cusp of a new year with things brewing in especially the financial world that I hesitate to do it because I want to be upbeat, but I also want people to be prepared. It's not fair to be upbeat when what you need is to be conscious. We are seeing a number of things that all speak to a financial calamity looming short term. And I would point specifically to, and I am no expert in this, I wish I understood it better, but the price of silver skyrocketing. Why is the price of silver skyrocketing? Well, the story, as I understand it, is that the price of silver has been artificially depressed. How do you artificially depress the price of a commodity that people can actually buy? Well, because we have two versions of the commodity. There's actual silver and there's paper silver. And paper silver can be printed. So, to the extent that the price of silver wants to rise because silver is scarce, those who are in a position to create silver by printing it and selling it so that you own some silver in your portfolio, but it's not a real metal, those people are in a position to drive the price down by creating the impression that there is supply where there isn't.
And it's not tagged. There's no silver standard with paper silver. It's not inherently tagged to real silver.
I believe it is over leveraged in an extreme fashion, which only ends up mattering. So let's say that you were looking at silver and, it's artificially depressed and I'd like to get in on profiting from it. Well, can you profit by buying paper silver? Short term. You can profit because if the price goes up, it doesn't matter which silver you have as long as you can sell it for whatever the price is. On the other hand, the danger, and this is what sophisticated people are talking about, is that there are going to be a tremendous number of defaults on the paper that does not have real silver as a backing. And that if you own real silver, therefore, instead of the price can skyrocket and you can get nothing because your paper is not valuable because the person who owes you the silver is bankrupt.
But if you've got real silver, is where you started, that can't happen to you.
If you have got real silver, that can't happen to you, right? Mm-hmm. So what is, I think, taking place is there is a battle between those who have spotted this looming catastrophe and are buying actual silver because they expect it to go up. They expect the stranglehold of those who can print it and artificially depress the price to be broken. And so ever more effort is being put into holding back that rising price by printing more, which is, of course, a positive feedback that is going to detonate. And what I have understood from these discussions, Michael Yon calls silver the blasting cap in the economy. And the point is, silver is not a big player in terms of how the world runs, but it is in a position to set loose the bursting of bubbles, the repricing of things that are mispriced because of artificiality like this in the markets. And so anyway, I think to make a long story short, timing markets is a fool's errand. There does appear to be a lot of movement in the direction of silver. Silver is known to be mispriced as a result of this artificial depression scheme. And the ability to hold back the natural price forever doesn't seem to exist. Mm-hmm. So what I think we need to be concerned about, we in the public, is that there's a lot of other dominoes poised to fall. So Michael Burry has been talking about bubbles, that is wildly mispriced corporations in the AI sector. Mm-hmm. Now, how you price these things, I don't know, but there is some overarching game where you've got the technology that AI uses, basically the software. You've got the technology that it runs on, the processors, and then you've got the energy necessary to run it. And all of those things, to the extent that you have marvelous processors and not enough energy to run them, this predicts, wars for energy. It predicts blackouts for normal people. So that is a difficult to price sector. And the claim is that it's wildly...
And because it's so new, because it's unprecedented, because the combination of things that it is reliant on does not exist before AI, I think.
Right. The having everything in the world run on this, which is increasingly going to be the case, and having, therefore, the battle to fuel the engine that does the thinking, predicts all sorts of things. Kinetic wars being the result of a battle in AI space is not far-fetched here. It also raises all kinds of questions about what other energy, are we going to get over the madness with fossil fuels? Presumably. Are we going to embrace a new nuclear era to fuel these things? Might even be a good thing if we used the proper technology, but the existing installed nuclear technology is very dangerous. A lot of that stuff needs to be decommissioned, and you need to start with 4th-gen reactors and all of that. So, again, very hard to price. But
but you get to keep your mountaintops.
Yeah.
Among other things.
Right.
And oceans.
Right, which is important because whatever else may be true, climate change may have been a bill of goods that we've been sold, but the environmental destruction that comes from mining these things is terrible, as is
very real
for, all of the metals involved in these technologies. But okay, so you've got artificial price manipulation with things like silver. It's true for other things like copper and gold, apparently, but silver is particularly egregious. You've got bubbles in the market where things have been mispriced and are headed for a big correction. And then you've also got fraud. And we have discussed with some folks who are in a position to evaluate these things, the fact that there appears to be an awful lot of major frauds in the market in positions you wouldn't expect it. And so when Michael Yon talks about silver as the blasting cap, this is how it could unfold, right? Silver breaks free from its artificially depressed price. This causes a repricing of a bunch of things because those who have sold people silver that they don't have to either get that silver or default. So you have a bunch of properties that, big banks and things, which may not be able to support the paper that they have outstanding, which then creates questions for all of the banks that we depend on. Will there be a bank run? What happens if there's a bank run? And the punchline to this awful narrative is I'm concerned that the really powerful people who understand where we are and know where the bodies are buried are aware of all of the rotten timbers that the financial structure is depending on, knows where they are. So it knows that at some point they're going to give way. If that involves normal people being unable to access their money because there's a bank run and banks shut down, that we may find ourselves ushered into a central bank digital currency as people are suddenly unable to live their lives because they don't have access to their money, and the FDIC that insures their money could deliver them their cash in central bank digital currency form. The reason that matters is because that's programmable money. And the ability to control us if our money is in a form that they can turn it off when we say things they don't like is extreme. So anyway, why would I say
programmable money, which, boy, am I out of my depth here, but I feel like doesn't deserve the name money if it doesn't have fungibility. If you can't buy anything that you have access to with an appropriate amount.
Let us say currency, actual money, has one defect, which is that it doesn't contain any stigma. So if you make your money in organized crime, you can still spend it like everybody else. So you can, you can engage in, murder and price fixing and every other thing. Take that money and then you can go into real estate and your money's as good as anybody else's. So that's a defect, that it carries no stigma. And then the defect of the central bank digital currency is exactly the inverse, is that somebody else can stigmatize you because you said, hey, that vaccine technology is dangerous. And the answer is, well, no, you can't say that because you're killing grandma. I'm sorry, your money's no good here or anywhere else. And I agree that it violates the most fundamental notion of what money is.
Yeah. And what you just said seems like a very concise statement of the pros and cons of the two models that should be stated whenever, I always forget, central digital, CDBC. I always want to say CBDC. CDBCs are, is it CBDC?
CBDC, central bank. Central bank, those are the evil guys.
Yeah, no, I know,
currency.
but I can also make it work as central digital bank currencies.
Yep.
So I'm sorry to put that in your head because I never get it right. CBDCs are, I think we got there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, for the DarkHorse audience, I just want them to think you're not going to be safe. None of us are. But you can think about how to immunize yourself from something that ultimately, I think, has told us in so many different ways that what it really wants is the ability to control what we think and say. And if we're willing to surrender to that, we will be left alone to live our measly little unimpressive lives. Obviously, nobody wants that. Many will accept it. But making yourself immune is, to the extent you're preoccupied with something, it's a good thing to preoccupy yourself with.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't make yourself immune.
Yeah.
But the thing that I lost back there over the order of the acronym, CBDCs should be laid out compared to actual currency in the way that you just did, with regard to them having the inverse costs. That money, as you said, currency doesn't retain its history, and CBDCs can not only do inherently maintain history, but can force a future, and can limit the future of their own existence, such that you cannot spend on what you might want to spend on.
Yes, it's like we've talked about the turnkey totalitarian state, which is a phrase that William Binney, the former NSA agent, formulated to describe the system, where they erect this prison around you, but they don't turn it on. And so you're not aware that it's there because it's like, I don't know what all those structures are, but it doesn't affect me. And then suddenly it does, and it's too late. Yeah. And the CBDCs carry this potential in them. And the thing that I'm trying to convince people of is this would be that in one move, right?
CBDCs.
Right.
Yeah.
If they tried to, if Trump announces the CBDC tomorrow, right, there will be a rebellion. Doesn't mean the rebellion will win, but lots of people are aware of how dangerous this is. Lots of us feel that we voted against such a thing when we voted for this person. If he announces it, oh boy, there's going to be a battle over whether or not that's a reasonable thing to do. On the other hand, if everybody's trying to figure out how the hell they're going to feed their families, and the answer is, well, the FDIC is willing to give you all your money back right now, and all you have to do is accept it in this form, and it's as good as anything else, people are going to do it. And the point is, if they do it, it's game over. It's game over. If you reran COVID in the context of everybody having only CBDC, we're living in hell at that point.
And we saw a version of this in Canada.
We sure did. And are still seeing it. It's amazing. I mean, Megan Murphy was debanked this year, I think.
Yep. And the organizers of the truckers' convoy, and even people who were merely participating, I believe, it was extraordinary. And it seems that kind of just as in the US, but at a smaller scale. Half-ish of the population in Canada didn't notice, doesn't care, right? Just as some large number of Americans with regard to authoritarian policies with regard to COVID in the US didn't notice, don't care. Would like to forget that it ever happened.
Yep. And this,
Would like to pretend that it never happened even.
So William Binney talks about the turnkey totalitarian state. I've talked about surgical totalitarianism, where the idea is once upon a time, the Stasi needed everybody to be ratting on everybody else in order to maintain control in East Germany. Now you can mess with just the tiny number of people who make a difference, and everybody else will be like, I'm not hiding anything. And the point is,
what do you need your privacy for?
Right. What's the big deal? And we've already surrendered so much. So if the public understands it is not being targeted, and the only people who are targeted are people who you're depending on to tell you what the hell is actually going on, then the point is, well, you're not going to know what's going on.
Actually, this is related to the one thing I wanted to say with regard to thinking ahead about sort of how to live our lives in the new year. There's a number of the sort of things that will be obvious to you and to regular viewers that it's coming from me. Things like, have more engagement with the physical world and fewer screens, spend more time in nature, more in-person interactions, fewer online interactions, all of this. But your privacy is so critical. And that means, in part, becoming comfortable with yourself sufficiently alone, that you don't start to scream literally or metaphorically in horror at the point that you are alone. So learning to become comfortable in your own solitude, preferably, and being on a screen with fake things, be they actual real people or bots or whatever, it doesn't count. Like actually just alone with yourself. And, obviously there are many traditions, some of which are called meditation, that involve solitude, but it needn't be that. And, for me, my preference is often, is to be walking in nature, but it needn't be that either. Just to become comfortable with your own solitude and to thus find some things out about yourself, to develop your own private life that is not meant for sharing. And to then also understand, what things should be shared, but in a limited way, as opposed to, the TMI of the modern era. That ability to find yourself in solitude and to actually enjoy it, to seek it out, helps insulate from, I don't know that it will help insulate from the CBDCs, but it will help insulate from some of the horrors that we talked about earlier today with regard to, online deviousness and the marketers and the advertisers who are constantly trying to draw your attention. That if you don't feel lonely when you're alone, you are much less likely to be dragged into something that isn't good for you. If you're much more likely to be resistant to the calls for your attention, if you think, actually I'm good. Like I don't need that. I don't need that thing right now. I'm good as I am, where I am, who I'm with, if it's only myself. So figuring out how to become someone who is comfortable with yourself and does not need either the recognition of or the interaction with something else, be it a real individual or very often online not, is empowering and will help you resist many of the devious forces.
Exactly right. My primary piece of advice is concordant with what you said, which is forge and maintain and invest in in-person relationships that are not intermediated by anything. And I almost wonder if that's not on the menu of possibilities. If you're not comfortable with yourself alone, the sound of your own thoughts, you're probably at least at a severe disadvantage in forging relationships with other people. Yeah. But I would say the two best things you can do are these two things. Figure out how to be comfortable with yourself. If you've lost touch, because you always do have that thing available to you, figure out how to deliberately put it down and remember what your own mind sounds like. And then forge relationships in person with other people that if things go haywire, it doesn't affect your connection.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep, really important.